Nice. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to reInvent 2016. This will be my third year at reInvent, and so I'm really excited to see all the growth, especially in the healthcare space. I think I've met with a lot of you already this year, and you've probably seen on our session track, we have more and more sessions about healthcare and life sciences. So this will be one focused primarily on a compliance topic that's near and dear to my heart, data integrity. And joining me today is Yano-san from Sysmex in Japan. And so I'll start off. Yano-san will share a case study that they worked on, and then I'll close out with some information on data integrity controls. So we'll be looking, first of all, at a high-level overview of data integrity in healthcare. It may be a little different for some of you who are coming from the pure developer world. We'll talk about an example with Sysmex and GXP, and then I'll wrap it up with a top 10 overview of data integrity controls that regulators are really emphasizing, both in their guidance to customers or to industry, as well as the inspection findings. So when they audit companies, what are they seeing? So my name's Chris Wally. I lead AWS's medical security team. And my team has a scope that really spans anything having to do with healthcare or life sciences, both on the research side, the healthcare delivery side, and the medical product side. So pharma companies, medical device companies, as well as genomics research, anything around the world having to do with healthcare and security, we get involved in pretty deeply. I spend about half my day working internally within AWS and service teams, and then I spend the other half with customers and working through their solutions and the control requirements that they have. So today we'll focus on integrity, the one part of the triad. I think confidentiality and privacy get a lot of play, and rightly so. But integrity is one of those things that, particularly in the medical product space, in the pharma and medical device, where they emphasize a lot about making sure that data is reliable and accurate. So when we talk about data integrity in healthcare, it's really about making sure the data that the clinicians are using, that quality assurance managers of manufacturing are using to make decisions that impact safety of people. So if they use a piece of data to approve the release of a drug to go out into the marketplace, they need to know that that data is good, right? They're making a decision that could affect all of us on that data. And so really the goal here is to make sure that data is valid enough to make for human safety decisions. And traditionally, this has been kind of a paper-based world. A lot of these companies are coming from. Lab notebooks have almost always been bound, spiral-bound things. And a lot of the controls and emphasis that regulators have had came out of that paper-based world. And now that we're in this electronic records world, they're basically all the old controls still apply, and there are some extra ones because of the nuance of running electronic systems. So this acronym, ALCOA, if you've been in the healthcare space for any amount of time, probably is familiar to you. It was developed out of the paper world again, so some of these things look a little foreign, but I think we'll talk about how you can translate the principles to the electronic and software world. And when we talk about data too, I think especially for technologists, it's important to distinguish between the bits on the disk and the scientific data that's being used to make decisions. They're related, but they're different, and the data integrity mechanisms are different for each one. And so on the left-hand side there, you see examples of scientific data. So that might be the pH of a solution, right, or the p-value of a clinical trial. That's data that can only be derived from analyzing a bunch of other bits on the disk and a human determining that that's the value. But then on the computer side, right, what is the input-output? What are the checksums? What are the file sizes? I just put this in context so that we understand it's more than just bits on the disk. And from the regulator perspective, this is really important. So here we see some examples of things that regulators find when they go and audit companies. So lack of controls to prevent substitution or overwriting of data. Again, that's a huge problem if you're trying to use that data to make a decision, and anybody could overwrite it and have no traceability. The companies in the healthcare space need to make sure that there's access controls. sending data from an instrument to a PC without an audit trail. Many of you are probably using IoT now, trying to figure out ways to connect either devices or in a laboratory setting, or even devices that go to people for healthcare. How do you use IoT to deliver data from the device to the system in the cloud running on an EC2 instance and provide all the audit trails necessary to show the provenance of that data? In this case, the company couldn't do that, and they got cited for it. Data was not reviewed or evaluated by your firm when making batch release decisions. So this is less about the technical controls now and more about the policy around the gates of a procedure for when does a human need to look at things and make a decision. And then lastly, we have an example of a company basically performing a bunch of tests and getting different results every time and picking the one result that they liked that fit the story of success for them and deleting all the old data that didn't fit their story of success. So again, how do we put audit trails around this so whatever data is created can't be deleted, even if it doesn't tell us the story we want? In some cases, that's the most important data because that will lead to improvements later on. So again, putting controls around that is really critical for any developer who's got an end user who may not be a technologist. They may be a scientist, they may be a clinician, have different levels of skill with computers. Some of these things might have happened well by accident. So as the gatekeepers of the electronic systems, it's up to us to put those controls in place to make sure, whether unintentionally or intentionally, users don't invalidate the data integrity. And then on the right here, we have the regulators themselves are increasingly not only citing companies in their audits, but producing guidance documents on what needs to happen. This is kind of a new world we're living in. The rules for a long time have been very vague, like you must have change control as appropriate. Well, what's appropriate? What's control? And now they're getting more prescriptive in the types of controls that they expect to see when they come to audit you. So I can provide a list to anyone who's really interested in these guidance documents. And then also, again, you can see from the warning letters, this isn't just a US issue, this is actually an international issue. One of the value propositions of the cloud is the ease of deployment and going global, right? Scaling from one customer and one site to many customers to many countries. And as you do that, the rules for data integrity may change from each region to region that you go in. So this really is highlighting the need to really take a global perspective on your systems, and also one of the reasons why Sysmex is joining today to really provide that kind of international flavor to this topic that's much needed. So if it's more than just bits on the disk, how do we go about applying these principles? And so really there's controls for humans. And this primarily consists of training and awareness, right? Getting people to understand, how do I build systems with these controls in place? What are the tools available to me if you're a developer? On the other hand, if you're a user, you may need to know what are the limitations of the system I'm using? What procedures do I need to follow in order to make sure that the whole system, people, process, and technology, has data integrity throughout it? Again, the policy and procedure conversation is one that I spend most of my time on. I think the IT and security teams are very adept at understanding technical controls and applying those in their systems. But when it comes to policy and procedure, it's an area where a lot of companies are still on that learning curve of what does a good policy look like. And this isn't a policy for like encryption. This is a policy for people to follow and read. So I think in my forecast for next year, that's really going to be an area where my team focuses a lot of time. And I hope by this time next year, we get to share more information with you about prescriptive guidance for helping your compliance and quality teams get those policies and procedures ready for the technologists to build the cloud tools. So then we also have these controls for machines, and I just wanted to touch on this topic here. We'll transition over to Yano-san, and then I'll pick back up with an analysis of those 5 documents, and we'll talk about the top 10 controls that we see regulators wanting for data integrity and some of the ways that you can meet it on AWS. So thank you again, and here's Yano-san.
Okay, thank you, Chris. It's a great honor for us to be here from Japan, Sysmex Corporation. One of the features of the AWS event is that the AWS users voluntarily share their own experience with transparency. And I have a lot from you guys, so that I'm so excited to share my experience and to return the favor to you. Okay? And Sysmex is a Japanese company established in 1968. And we are the integrated supplier of the instrument, reagent, and software that are essential to the testing processes performed during the health check and the treatment and the ongoing disease management. And our company's name is named after the coined word, which stands for Sysmetical, Medics, and infinity symbol X. Our corporate mission defines our raison d'etre, reason to exist, and state how we hope to contribute to the society. In the field of the hematology, which involves the red and white blood cells, the Sysmex group holds the top share of the global market. And our products are used in medical institutions in more than 190 countries. We have concentrated on the field diagnostics, where the company has played the integrated role of the testing, control, and testing of the blood and the urine samples, and have expanded into the several fields of the in vitro diagnostics and expanded our operations onto the global scale. And this slide shows our business outlook. And our business has achieved the remarkable growth over the past decade. The net sales has grown for 16 years in a row, and operating income has grown 15 years consecutively. Though the Sysmex is a Japanese company, more than 80% of sales come from outside of Japan. And I want to touch on a couple of recognitions from the outside, from the market. For example, we are listed as one of the top 5 most innovative companies by Forbes this year. And actually, 4 Japanese companies are listed on the top 50 listed, but we are one of them. And we have also been included in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index from this year. Okay. And let me move on my department, Information Solutions, is responsible for the global IT strategy development as a headquarter team. And in parallel, we are helping our corporate system implementations based on our customer needs and provide ongoing systems support as well. Today, I'd like to pick up one global project I have worked on and as a case study. And as Chris said, we need to address the GXP compliance and so on, but I hope that you are enjoying our case study. Our operating environment is growing over more complex and uncertain, and we are expanding in the global scale, so that we need to respond swiftly to emerging changes. In such circumstances, our user requirements has been increasing, like 24 support for the global systems, and they require more agility for the new system setups. And needless to say, security is always top priority for us. So in general, we want to be the early adopter for the new technologies. Like we already introduced IoT to monitor our ongoing instrumental status check, and we deliver the iPhone, the iPad for the Japan-based employees already. But we are likely to be a bit conservative, or we want to be careful about the cloud technology introduction because of the security risk. And in order to leverage the cloud technology, we have discussed how the global cloud security policy should be developed with the global leadership, IT leadership team. Like we refer to the ENISA, NIST, and MITI from Japan governance. We are leading these security guidelines. And we also deliver the SARS checklist for the users' requirements. We developed this guideline based on the METI guideline, and so that we can control our business users' SaaS requirements needs. And for example, the e-learning system and so on, with checking their security, that we approve to introduce their SaaS systems for our company. And for IaaS and the SaaS services, our mission, our development mission is to provide the infrastructure platform for our business users. So we have provided the resources. For example, in current now, our internal server rooms management is done by ourselves, and we have provided such resources to our business users. And it's critical to establish the selection and the concentration strategy to leverage the IaaS services, so that we have evaluated a lot of IaaS and the PaaS services. And you can see how we are thinking about the AWS. Of course, we are aware that AWS is overwhelming the market leader in IaaS and the PaaS services, but we are pretty much interested in the large community with engineers and the partners and also the user companies. So that we are pretty much interested in the information exchange or to share our experience, so that we can talk about the future, and let's talk about our innovation seeds and the ecosystem idea and so on. I just ran the application of the reInvent. Have you tried? You can see my name, for example, from this application. So I'm happy to talk with you in a couple of days. And any comments or any feedback are highly welcomed. Okay. And for this session, I'd like to pick up this case study. I'd like to focus, we kicked off the project to introduce a quality compliant management project. We need to collect the compliant information about our product from all over the world. Okay? And so far, we have managed such information via email or phone, but it's not easy right now because we are operating more than 190 countries. So we need to introduce the one single system, so that, for example, in Japan, we have a headquarters, and we played as a third level escalation point. But it's not easy to reach to all over the world, so that we decided to introduce such one global system. And this is to address our compliant management information. So we need to observe GxP compliance, and also we need to meet ERES requirements here. And and this application itself is a packaged software, so that it's called as a configured software, because we need to modify our workflow. And so that you can think that it's a category 4 in the GAMP 5 definition. And in parallel with application software validation, we started option studies about our infrastructure platform. This slide shows some key highlights of our user requirements. First of all, the system should capture the information from all over the world, so the 24/7 support is required, regardless of the location of the server rooms, of the holiday schedule, and so on. And on the other hand, fortunately, frankly speaking, it's not a mission-critical system compared to the ERP system and so on, because we already have alternative solutions in case of the system trouble and so on. And the system architecture is very simple. We have only 3 servers: reporting server, application server, and database server. Very simple architecture. And another thing is that about the long-term data storage. For this case, we need to keep these information for 15 years. 15 years. And I think in general, for the medical industry, I think you need to keep the data for 20 years or 30 years to follow the legal law. Okay? So for these user requirements, we think that we might be able to use the cloud. Maybe cloud might be the lead option for this infrastructure. For example, for 15 years data storage, I'm still having a floppy disk or a cassette tape and so on, but I don't think that it's readable now. for most of the devices. So you might save the data in the CDR and so on, but think about 15 years later. Do you think that the CDR is readable? No, right? So that, for example, for AWS S3, their availability is 99.999, very high reliability. So the cloud is more suitable for such a long-term data storage. This is another view that we are thinking. So we try to think about the cloud as a lead option for this system infrastructure. And this is just a project schedule. And this was kicked off in September. And by the way, personally, I joined the Sysmex in October 1st. And suddenly, I was assigned for this technical lead. And I need to develop the sandbox by the end of October. And I have to be in very hurry for this project. But AWS helped. Well, I could start up the 3 instances in 2 hours. So I succeeded in the procurement of this sandbox environment. And in this week, I just watched the video of reInvent. By the way, this was the first time for me to operate cloud or AWS. But so I learned a lot about for the AWS. And in last year, very interesting idea was shared. By introducing cloud, in the cloud era, maybe validation actions can be transferred to the code-driven automated activities. Okay? So far, we developed a lot of documents. But we might be moved to the cloud code-driven automated activities. I'll touch on how we judge this view later on. And in January and February, the very helpful information was shared, like a GXP white paper by AWS. And this is only for Japanese, but Japanese some system integrators issued a good reference about for GXP compliance. So upon these available resources, we discussed the feasibility, and we made a decision around May before the software validation target from early July. And first of all, we studied AWS reliability. Well, we have some trust because already the US government used the AWS solution in their cloud, special cloud area. So I believe that the AWS has AWS might be the secured platform for us. And actually, I read the white paper about the GXP systems, GXP compliance issued in January. And we confirmed that several professional certifications, like ISO 9001, 27001, and 27001 and 27001, 27017. It's a safety way. Actually, I'm nervous now. And you can see this is actually updated 2 weeks ago. When we checked their functions, for example, API gateway or Lambda was not in the list of the ISO 27001. Okay? But they updated the ISO certifications, and now the API gateway or Lambda is now in the list of the ISO certifications. But we are not such a level to use like Lambda and so on. We use the EC2, S3, CloudFormation, CloudTrail, and so on. But we checked these ISO certifications on the official list. And in addition, let me introduce some regional practice. We leverage the AWS utilization reference for life science industry, published in February, and by Japanese 5 system integrators. In Japan, MHLW, Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, provides a guideline of the management of computerized systems of marketing authorization holders and manufacturers of drugs and quasi-drugs. Sorry, I'm reading this. But you can think that it's a kind of the GAMP5 in the US. And in Japan, we need to follow such a guideline. And one of the beauty of this guideline or reference is that, for example, there are many, many chapters. Like there are 9 chapters in our Japanese government guideline. This reference shows us some correspondence between each chapter and the clouds and third-party certifications. For example, 6.3, chapter 6.3, performing maintenance and checking management. And to address these requirements, this reference says that we need to refer to ISO 27001, 7.3, 8.1, 9.1, 9.3. And for example, 6.5, backup and restore. This is both accountability for AWS and the users. But for the AWS part, it's a black box for us. We don't know where the location of the Tokyo availability zone A, for example. We cannot look at their operations. But we can see the third-party certifications then to check if they observe such a requirement. For example, ISO 9001 and SOC 1.2. Upon the NDA, you can get the SOC 1.2 information from AWS. And by looking at these third-party certifications, you can check that if the AWS can meet the GxP compliance. And this is the life cycle that our Japanese government defines, but I think it's a global flow from the system setup and retirement. And this guideline, this reference follows the orange part, like part of the operations and the supplier audit and supplier assessment and so on. And for the other part, like setting the guideline, the standard code and so on, it's a common rule regardless of the infrastructure. And for others, like to capture the user requirement specifications, functional specification and so on, they are common regardless of the infrastructure. So we can have a same step that we have done so far for the on-premise. Let me touch on the IQ later, because we expect some changes for the IQ by introducing the cloud and on the cloud era. Okay, let me summarize the operation part. First of all, we should understand the several AWS functionalities. Let me check. It's here. We need to accept some game change or paradigm shift here. To do the data backup, let's leverage S3. And for monitoring, CloudTrail, CloudWatch. And for the proper account management, we need to make use of the IAM. This is a game change compared to the on-premise era. And in parallel, we need to check how the AWS can guarantee the highly reliable operations. Well, with SOC 1.2 and the ISO certifications, you should read every chapter and to check if they are meeting with the GxP compliance. That's a user company's responsibility. Okay? And actually, AWS maintains the good practices for the internal training, documentation, system monitoring, and so on. So that you can double check from these third-party certifications. And in the next couple of slides, let me share our key takeaways about IQ activities. And this illustrates the system architecture that we designed. And to ensure our security requirements, verification and the production environment are set up in VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. And our end user can access to these application server via Direct Connect. And our third-party vendor can log in via RDP through the Sophos UTM. This is the overview architecture for this system. And actually, this is production and validation. No ELB on this system. We can accept 99.5 availability for this system. And the key point is here. To develop our validation target, you can create these instances. You can set up these instances by logging in into the management console. you can do the manual handling. But maybe you don't take such action. I think you need to, you want to leverage AWS CloudFormation, right? And if you upload the CloudFormation program into the S3, and you can run on the S3, and you can get all of the system logs. You can check what's happened in your management console. So this is actually the JSON format that we used, and just only for 6 instances. Well, the number of lines is about 800, very, very short program. And in this short program, this includes all of the information about the instances or subnet or the VPCs and so on. All of the infrastructure information is included in CloudFormation. Okay? And theoretically, we understand that this code includes everything about for the infrastructure, and with maybe system logs, maybe we can declare that that's the evidence of the IQ. Okay? Theoretically, we understood. However, we are thinking about the risk about this. For example, for the whether we have accountability. Well, we can explain whether it's same. This is same as this infrastructures. Well, due to the time constraints, frankly speaking, for this project case, we gave up. So we took a lot of screenshots, and more than 180 screenshots, and I have 68 pages for the validation document. However, we felt a lot of possibility about this idea. So this is the one point that I want to share. I think if you want to reapply this approach, maybe you face this difficulty. Okay? And I don't think, for example, for Sysmex, we cannot solve this issue by ourselves. So that's why I'm here. Today, one of the key points of my presentation is that maybe we need to have a large community to tackle on this issue. Maybe this is a universal issue, or universal challenge for us. So let me summarize our validation activities. This is a recap. First of all, procurement. I can say our traffic signal is green. Okay? By using the AWS, for the beginners, I was actually really beginners of the AWS. I succeeded in procurement the 3 servers, for Sandbox 3 servers, in 2 hours. Okay? It's pretty fast than the on-premise. And operation planning, it's, the green and the yellow. This means that, we need to have some growing pains, first of all. We need to understand all of the AWS functionalities, and we need to revisit the ISO certifications and the GAM5 and so on, these documents. And also we need to go through the SOC 1, 2 that AWS has. Okay? So there is a growing pains, but I can say that this will be blue for the second and third practices. And for IQ effort, I just as yellow. To be exact, we succeeded in reducing the IQ effort for example, network setup and so on. So far, we need to visit our server rooms, and we need to touch on the Terraform and so on, and to see the network configurations. But we can check these network configurations on management console. So I can say that part of IQ effort was reduced by the cloud, on the cloud. However, most of the effort was not saved. We had to take a similar approach that we have taken on the on-premise. But I believe that theoretically, it might be possible. So I want to share our experience here today. And I want to touch on some key enabler to make it happen. I think you want to take a photo here. Please upload to your blog. Special thanks to NTT Docomo. They provide kind of the guideline. NTT Docomo is one of the biggest Japanese mobile phone carriers, and they leveraged AWS to run their mobile phone applications. And they share their own cloud management policies to observe the ISO 27017. And their policy also includes the education material for the internal users. So this is a Bible for us to manage the IaaS and the PaaS management. And the class method is one of 5 Japanese SI premier consulting partners. But in this morning, there are more 2 premier companies are at it. It was announced, so it's now 7, one of 7. But they also helped to leverage, they helped the AWS setup. And I want to highlight Hitachi and Fila Systems. They are also the AWS Reference guideline issued in Japan. There are actually 5 system integrators that issued this reference, but Hitachi and the Hewlett's are part of them. And for validation activities and document support, we got a lot of support from them. Actually, Hitachi is very famous in Japan for the medical industry, and they have a lot of experience for the GxP compliances. And for this particular package software, Hitachi is a seller in Japan market. So the Hitachi is very familiar with this application itself. And the Fila Systems, they are a small company in Japan, but they support these activities with super agility, and they also support some English translation for the validation document and so on. Okay, here are our key learnings and some expectations. For system infrastructure choices, though it's a common suggestion for ourselves for the next project, carefully consider why you use cloud or on-premise based on the business needs. Okay? And we need to review the latest available resources, like GxP white paper or AWS Reference, that without looking at these latest information, maybe it was tough for us to decide to leverage AWS. Okay? And the use case sharing will help the ecosystem development. So I expect that today's opportunity to share our experience and let's exchange our opinion about these activities. And for Amazon, please keep your strategy to listen to users, and so that I believe that the AWS is a good listener from the users to develop the new functions. Okay, and this is the last slide from my side. That's our corporate mission statement, and each of us, need to think about how to contribute to this. And I personally believe that our case study sharing will contribute to this health industry. And I'm looking forward to talking with you continuously in a couple of days. Thank you for listening.
Nice. Thank you, Yano-san. So I think that will give you kind of a high-level altitude of the process where data integrity controls may apply. And what we'll do now is kind of dive into some more of the detail, individual controls, and some of the strategies that you can use throughout the life cycle. So the number one, and these are ranked in order of kind of their importance that we saw across the 5 documents and warning letters that we reviewed. The number one thing is a risk-based approach. So many of you in the security world using your security risk assessment, that's absolutely in line with this. I think the other part of that now is really adding in the additional controls for data integrity and thinking through not just the risk of the system while it's operating, but the risk of each phase of supplier procurement, of planning, of the validation, and of operations as well. So don't just think about your system in its final state. Think about it from the time it's an idea all the way through the planning and development stage. We provide a lot of information, like Yano-san mentioned, around our compliance reports, white papers, so that you can do that risk assessment in a meaningful way. We also have solution architects and security solution architects who are able to answer any questions that you have that aren't already answered in our publications. And so performing that risk assessment obviously is your team's responsibility, making sure that you own your system and the risks associated with it. The other aspect, in just by us providing the tools and configurations, each tool, S3, may be configured for data integrity in a different way from system to system. So that flexibility of the tools is what we do to help you meet your requirements. But then really understanding at your system level, what are the requirements, what are the configurations needed to meet those requirements, and then how do you test and ensure that they're enforced throughout the life cycle. Restricting access to data. It seems pretty simple, right? But there's still a lot of companies that get cited for failure to restrict data access. As we saw in those other examples, people were overwriting data with no audit trail, no access controls. So it sounds simple to many of us who are used to developing highly robust systems, but at an industry scale, this is still a problem and will continue to be until we get better at doing this. The other aspect is restrict access to the audit. OK, so this is restricting access to data access controls. It's the second part of that, that's right. So these are some of the tools you're already familiar with that you can use. The SDKs in particular are very important at the software layer. Make sure that you're invoking the functions that you need to trigger those audit trails, to capture user commands, to actually prompt users for reasons for change. That's another big element. It's very easy to log an activity, but it's hard to associate the human intent behind that activity with the machine transaction at the API level. So you need to figure out where are the key points that you have to prompt a user to provide that meaning, and then capture that and associate it with the machine logs that are kept in CloudTrail or S3 or wherever you generate and store your logs. The audit trail itself needs to be protected. So it's not just enough to protect your content. The audit trail around it is as valuable from the regulator perspective as the data. It tells the story of how the data was made, what happened to it throughout its life cycle, and if needed, at the end of its retention cycle, what happened when you destroyed it. Is it really gone? So having those audit trail controls to keep the right audit trails. You may not need to keep every single log. Maybe you only need to keep the ones that were wrong or the ones that proved a key part of your infrastructure was built the way you say that it was. But really identifying what are the audit trails I need to keep and then putting access controls around those so you don't get rid of them accidentally or, unfortunately, maliciously. So this word contemporaneously is a really compliancy word. I've said this word to a lot of technologists, and they're just like, what does that mean? And it really came out of the idea of the handwritten records, where the idea is recording data at the time that you collect it. So if you're looking through a microscope and you're counting cells, and you're going to record that cell count value somewhere in a form or in a logbook, doing it right when you perform the activity, and then capturing the date and time that the event occurred. Now, in the physical world of paper, it's a much more important control. I think in the electronic world, it's really translated to distributed systems, like making sure that you're synchronizing time systems, right? If you've got a server in Europe and a server in the US, make sure that you're using the same base of time on each of those so that if you need to tell the story at a global scale, you can fast forward and rewind and really see in real time where did things happen. We've got built-in time zone controls into many of our tools, but then again, at the software layer, you may also need to consider how you develop the software to account for time zones. And again, the SDKs are a good way to do that. The best way to control blank paper form is to not have it. But if you have to have it, creating that, I think we have some good examples. One of the examples, Captricity, working with HHS, I think we have on our, either on our YouTube or our website. And they tell a story about how FDA is using a data capture pipeline for safety reports, and then publishing those reports onto a public website so you can download and analyze the trends. That's a good example that you could apply in your own organizations, where if you have blank paper forms or lab notebooks that you need to ensure are protected, creating that imaging pipeline so that you can capture very quickly those paper forms and retain the electronic image as long as you need to retain the record. And then it's not just enough just to have the logs. You actually have to review them. Someone's got to look at them. If something goes wrong, it's up to us to figure out what is going wrong, and the way we get those flags is from the logs themselves. So a lot of teams that I've seen implement this through either Lambda functions, where they're scanning pools of logs, looking for out-of-spec events that will trigger somebody either in the security or the compliance team to do an investigation. And we also have partners in the marketplace and others who provide out-of-the-box solutions that will do that as a tool that you can buy instead of roll your own. It really depends on kind of what the scale and scope of your system is going to be if you're purchasing your system versus building it yourself. But just some simple guidelines here. Retention of audit trails. So not just controlling access, but controlling how long you keep them. Again, it's a lot of record retention schedules that I've seen are really good about the data itself. If this is some patient information, it's very clear how long to keep the data. But as you start getting more and more away from that direct content into the metadata or the audit trails, a lot of the record retention policies that I see are not including those as retainable items. So making sure you work with your compliance teams to identify what do you need to keep. Is it in your record retention policy? How do I build rules around it to keep it? Like Glacier has Vault Lock, for example, where you could create a read-only vault to store those records with a lock on it for a certain amount of time so that they can't be deleted up until that retention period. But then you might also need a human process around that once the Vault Lock unlocks to say, do we really want to delete that data? Is it really okay? Even though we've kept it the amount of time that our record retention schedule required, maybe there's a business need to keep it longer. Maybe there's something else about that data that's important. So again, this is kind of the intersection of like the human controls of policy and the technology controls that we bake into the system. And that's really the next evolution for healthcare. We're on the front end of the adoption curve now. The policy piece is probably the next big chunk to accelerate that wave even further. Obviously, validating your systems is very important. And it's funny, we have a lot of controls around the system itself, and yet we're still using paper-based validation, right? I think Yano-san's example is a great case study in that. Even though they weren't able to use CloudTrail to prove their validation policy was met, we do have other customers who have done this. And one of the interesting things we talk about with them is your auditor ready to look at logs? If you've got an auditor who has 20 years experience at looking in documents in a paper form that have certain characteristics, and all of a sudden you're the outlier and you present a bunch of JSON files to them, are they ready for that? Is that really the auditor experience you want to have? So it's being aware of who you're trying to present the information to and giving it in the form that they're best able to see the answer in. In some cases, we've had customers build full pipelines of document generators that pull CloudTrail data into a thing that looks like a PDF, simply so the format is familiar to their auditors. On the other hand, we've had customers who build training modules for the auditors themselves to say, do that translation ahead of time before they present the evidence. So they can say, to the auditor, you may be used to seeing it in this format. In our team, we keep it in this other format, and here's a traceability matrix between the two. So I have yet to see the industry standardize on one approach, but I think in the spirit of Yano-san's suggestion, it would be good for all of us to come together to figure out what are the ways or way that we want to present this information to people who don't build these tools all day long. And then, of course, senior management responsibility. So this one in particular stood out to me from the perspective of the guidance documents. And it's something that's emphasized a lot on the patient safety side. And I think it's really interesting now to see it on the data governance side, where really, we are the owners of the system and the builders of the system. But at the end of the day, the senior management of the organization that you belong to has to be accountable. It's not enough just to say we're all in, but not provide the training and resources that you need to get there. And so really, we got to help our leaders understand in the healthcare community what it means to have a data governance program, how it affects developers, technologists, compliance people. They're the ones who are probably going to have to sign on the policy being approved, the change for that. So getting them up to speed on why we're making these changes, why it's accelerating adoption of the cloud, why it's better than some of the traditional approaches we've had. I think that's also our collective learning curve here. Again, we have a lot of documentation to help you tell that story. When you get authorization to take training, there's a ton of content directly from us as well as from our partners. And we're happy to come help you figure out what that training plan should look like with your team. And then also this open culture of reporting errors. So as we saw in some of those examples from the regulator audit reports, clearly there was not oversight that errors should be reported. There was this culture of it's okay to overwrite the data, it's okay to throw out data that doesn't fit the story that we want. And so I think this, again, it's just more awareness about how the full 360 of the organization needs to come together to solve this one problem. It's not just for the system builders to solve by themselves. We're certainly a big part of it, but we need senior management to also be aware of this, the impact that they have on getting the culture of our teams to be open about sharing things. Because ultimately, when we want to do an improvement, we have to recognize a deficiency somewhere. So it's really the kind of the Kappa cycle in action. So these slides will all be available for you, anyone who wants them to follow up. They're text heavy, so I'm sure there will be a lot to read and digest after. And we're going to be around for a few minutes, so if anyone wants to come ask questions, please do so. And thank you all, and please fill out your evaluations. So thanks.